welcome back to our segment on social media and the law. And today we are having Ms. Fernandez as our guest today. So how are you, Ms. Fernandez?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for sitting down with me, Ms. Fernandez. So let us talk about the article in the Utusan Malaysia that dated on 20th November 1995. What happened, Ms. Fernandez?
Thank you. That article, the one titled Sikap Irene Lengahkan Siasatan, was not just misleading, it was defamatory. It accused me of delaying police investigations, which is absolutely untrue.
I see. So the article claimed that you were avoiding interviews with the police?
Yes, it implied that I was being uncooperative in an investigation related to my own report, the one exposing the abuse of undocumented migrant workers in detention centers in Semenyih.
I see. So I want to know, did the journalists reach out to you for your side of the story?
No, not even once. There was no attempt to verify the facts with me, so the journalists relied solely on statements from the Ministry of Home Affairs, and that's not responsible journalism.
That is so unethical of the journalists. And what was the tone of the article?
Cynical, accusatory. It painted me as someone with something to hide, when, in truth, I was advocating for justice for people who had no voice.
I see. So who was behind the article?
So the first defendant is the publisher and owner of Utusan Malaysia. The second defendant was the journalist who wrote the article. And the third was the acting head of the features desk. He is the one who chose that headline.
Yes.
A headline that suggested wrongdoing on my part without evidence.
So now, Ms. Fernandez, you are taking legal action?
Yes, I filed a claim for damages and a permanent injunction. My reputation matters not for my sake alone, but for the people I voice that isn't silenced or discredited through false reporting.
I see. So thank you, Ms. Fernandez, for sharing that. It is a powerful reminder of how important truth and accountability are, especially in the media.
Exactly. Freedom of press comes with responsibility, and I will always stand up for what's right, and that includes standing up for myself when I have been wrong.
This court is now in session to hear the case of Irene Fernandez against Utusan Melayu Sdn Bhd and another.
Your Honor, we appear today on behalf of the plaintiff Irene Fernandez, a public figure, a respected human rights advocate, and the founding director of Tina Gianita Sdn Bhd. Irene Fernandez is widely known for her tireless work in defending the rights of migrant workers and women. However, her reputation was unjustly tarnished by a defamatory article published in Utusan Malaysia on the 20th of September 1995.
And who are the parties responsible for this publication?
The first defendant, Your Honor, is the publisher and owner of Utusan Malaysia. The second defendant was at the time an employee and the author of the impugned article. And the third defendant, who served as the acting Ketua Meja Rencana or chief editor of the features desk, was responsible for the article's title, Sikap Irene Lengahkan Siasatan, which translates as Irene's attitude delays investigation.
Your Honor, we contend that the article merely reported on ongoing investigations and was based on information from the Ministry of Home Affairs.
With respect, the article was written in a cynical tone. It falsely alleged that Ms. Fernandez deliberately avoided police interviews in relation to her own report on the mistreatment of undocumented migrant detainees in Semenyih.
Was there any attempt made by the journalist to verify the claims with Ms. Fernandez?
None, Your Honor. The journalist did not reach out to her for clarification or comment. Instead, they solely relied on statements from government officers. As a result, the article presented a one-sided and misleading narrative.
And what remedy is the plaintiff seeking?
We seek damages for defamation, Your Honor, as well as a permanent injunction to prevent the further publication of such defamatory content.
Welcome to our segment Social Media and the Law. Today we are discussing a landmark Malaysian case that involves defamation through social media. Today, Datuk Muhammad Salim Fateh will be joining us. Assalamualaikum, Datuk.
Waalaikumsalam.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
So, Datuk, thank you for joining us today for our segment. But before you enter the court, could you briefly explain the background of your case regarding defamation that happened recently?
Certainly. So I brought a claim against the journalist who made 2 defamatory statements towards me. So which then severely damaged my reputation as a businessman. So this thing also caused me extreme embarrassment and distress.
I see. So, what exactly is mentioned in the tweets?
The tweets contain allegations about my ethnicity and insinuation of corruption relating to land development projects. So the first statement implied that I was trying to cover my identity, that I am a Pakistani but not a Bumiputra. In fact, my grandparents were indeed from Pakistan, but I am a local inhabitant as my parents, and I was born in Malaya before the Independence Day. Then the second statement devalued me by claiming that I had stolen land and obtained land through bribery practices and was involved in illegal land deals.
Okay. So, Datuk, what was your reaction when you received the tweets?
Through my solicitors, I demanded that the journalist cease and desist from further publication, issue a full and unequivocal public apology and retraction. However, instead of complying, the journalist responded with a further tweet suggesting his willingness to do battle.
That is so unethical of the journalist. So, Datuk, did the journalist defend himself in the court?
As the defendant served no defense, he was deemed to have admitted every averment in the plaintiff's statement of claim. So consequently, the court only had to deal with the issue of damages to be awarded to me.
I see.
This court is now in session to hear the case of Datuk Muhammad Salim and Nadeswaran anak lelaki Raja regarding an allegation of defamation via social media.
My lord, I claim that the defendant published 2 defamatory statements on Twitter. It can be contended that the 2 defamatory statements have been read by a substantial number of individuals who read or follow the defendant's tweets. And as a result, these tweets implied corruption and mock my ethnic background, which has been severely damaged my professional reputation. Therefore, I sought for general, aggravated, and exemplary damages, a public retraction, and public apology, also an injunction to restrain further defamatory acts by the defendant or any of his agents.
After reviewing the evidence and the defendant's admission, the court finds the statement to be defamatory. The defendant is ordered to pay 300,000 ringgit in general damages and 200,000 ringgit in aggregated damages. An injunction is also granted to prohibit any further repetition of the statements.
Since the trial court decision has ended, let us hear the Datuk's comment. So, Datuk, what is the court's decision on the case?
So the Kuala Lumpur High Court found that the tweets were defamatory and ordered Nadeswaran to pay 300,000 ringgit in the general damages and 200,000 ringgit in aggravated damages. So an injunction was also issued in prevent him from repeating the statements.
I see, Datuk. Thank you for having us today.
Alright, thank you.
So, congrats, Datuk, for winning the case.
Please vote me for the next election.
Will do.
The purpose of the Reynolds Privilege Defense is to protect the media when they report matters of public interest in a responsible way. Even if what is said actually turns out to be untrue, the reason is that it can be very difficult, especially when dealing with powerful people and organizations, to prove that an allegation is true. especially as a story will often only be newsworthy for a short length of time, so there will be time pressures on journalists to get it out. Requiring the media to be able to prove to be satisfaction of a court that every allegation is true before they publish would invariably mean that some important and true stories would never get published at all, as well that some false ones would be prevented from being published. The idea behind this is that proving something is 100% true before publishing can be very hard, especially when dealing with powerful people or organizations, as mentioned in the article wrote by Kenyon and Ang 2010. The defense tips the balance in favor of freedom of expression by allowing that it is better for the law to allow some untrue stories to be published if that means that important true stories are not suppressed because they cannot be proved. This is in turn balanced by the fact that the media will only be protected if they have behaved responsibly in their circumstances. This principle was clarified by the UK Supreme Court in Flood and Times Newspaper Ltd, which reaffirmed the central role of responsible journalism and highlighted the importance of verifying serious allegations prior to publication, as mentioned by O'Neill 2012. It is generally recognized the description applies to serious issues such as the behavior of elected or official bodies and commercial companies and the people who work in or represent them, but not to subjects like the private life of celebrities. Essentially, this means that the court will look at the content and subject of the allegations and the way the press acted in researching and reporting them. The previous Reynolds defense, which we will look at below, contain a list of factors which could be taken into account, including how damaging the allegations were, where the information came from, and what steps the press took to discover whether they were true and present the claimant's side of the story. These kinds of factors are likely still to be important when courts look at the circumstances of the case, but they will not be a checklist or a series of hurdles that a defendant has to jump. In fact, a close reading of Reynolds suggests they were never meant to be used in that way anyway, but in practice that was what often happened under the previous law. In the case of Irene Fernandez, the rejection of all the defendant's pleaded defenses includes, by implication, the Reynolds qualified privilege if it was invoked. Under Reynolds and Times Newspaper Ltd, a defamatory statement published in the public interest may be protected only if it was the product of responsible journalism. This includes efforts to verify information, giving the plaintiff a chance to respond, and presenting balanced reporting. In this case, the court made no finding of responsible journalism. Instead, the serious and unverified allegations and the lack of any accepted defenses suggest that defendants fails to meet the threshold for Reynolds protection. The publication was not conducted in a fair, accurate, or balanced manner and was therefore not shielded by qualified privilege. In my opinion, the court's decision affirms a core principle of defamation law. Allegations that harm a person's integrity or character must be substantiated and published responsibly. The award of general damages, while modest compared to aggravated or exemplary damages in other cases, reflects recognition of the real harm caused to the plaintiff's reputation. The rejection of all defenses underscores that freedom of speech is not a license to defame, especially when serious accusations are made without proper basis. It also reaffirms that journalists and publishers have a duty to uphold professional standards, and failure to do so remove the shield of Reynolds privilege. This case reinforces the importance of accountability in public discourse and sends a clear message about the legal consequences of irresponsible publication. In Datuk Salim case, this highlights conduct inconsistent with the Reynolds qualified privilege, which protects responsible journalism on matters of public interest. The Reynolds defense requires the defendant to act responsibly, including steps like verifying the truth of the statement, seeking the plaintiff's response, and showing balance or fairness in publication. In this case, the continued defamatory publication and lack of remorse suggests that the defendant did not meet the standards of responsible journalism. As such, the Reynolds privilege will not be available to the defendant. The court's findings imply that defamatory material was published maliciously or recklessly, disqualifying any protection under Reynolds. In my opinion, this judgment reflects the court's commitment to protecting reputational interests in the face of the plaintiff's irresponsible and persistent defamation. The refusal to grant exemplary damages may be seen as proportionate given the significant sums already awarded in general and aggravated damages. However, the case also illustrates the limits of Reynolds privilege, which mean the freedom of expression must be balanced against responsibility, and reckless or malicious publication cannot claim protection under the guise of public interest journalism.
Datuk Muhammad Salim Fatih bin Fatidin and Nadaswaran, anak lelaki Raja, and Irene Fernandez and Utusan Melayu Sindia Merhad and another highlight the judicial position in Malaysia regarding defamatory publications, especially in the context of public interest and journalism. In both cases, the courts found that the defendants published defamatory content without exercising responsible journalism or verifying the facts with the plaintiffs. In Datuk Salim case, the defamatory tweets remained online with no attempt at retraction, leading to a ruling in his favor. Similarly, Irene Fernandez was defamed in an article that was published without seeking her comment, with the court concluding that the article was neither urgent nor responsibly reported. These outcomes also illustrate the limits of relying on the Reynolds defense, which is meant to protect the freedom of expression in matters of public interest. However, as seen in both cases and echoed in the Court of Appeal's commentary on the Times Label ruling, the Reynolds privilege has little practical value when journalists fail to meet the required standards of responsible journalism, such as verifying sources, offering the subject of a right of reply, and ensuring accuracy. The courts emphasize that continued publication of defamatory content, absence of remorse, and failure to verify facts before publication justify not only the finding of liability, but also the award of substantial general and aggravated damages. Although exemplary damages were not awarded in either case, the monetary compensation, combined with injunctive relief, was deemed adequate for the protection of the plaintiff's reputation and to prevent further defamation. Overall, these cases reinforce the principle that while the freedom of the press and public interest reporting are vital, they must be exercised with responsibility and integrity. Failure to do so undermines the credibility of the media and erodes the protection offered by defenses like the Reynolds privilege, which courts are increasingly reluctant to uphold unless there is a clear evidence of journalistic diligence and fairness.